The more I think about the debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, the more I start to think that J.D. Vance was able to sane-wash himself to an extreme degree. He was able to come off a bit more moderate than the extremist we know he is. J.D. Vance has called for things like a national abortion ban. He said he wouldn't have certified the 2020 election if he were in Mike Pence's shoes. And he was the jerk who started the insane conspiracy theories about Haitian immigrants eating people's cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. And I don't think Tim Walz did a sufficient enough job pushing back and showing the American people that J.D. Vance is, in fact, a radical candidate. Now, if we're talking about the substance of the debate, I've already said that Tim Walz definitely takes the cake, but he definitely could have done a better job of pointing out how extreme J.D. Vance actually is. But one thing that really stood out to me, and it was the first video that I released after the debate, was their conversation about the events on January 6th. And what stood out the most to me was that J.D. Vance couldn't even concede that Trump lost the 2020 election. And the Harris and Walz campaign has immediately jumped on that and cut a great ad. But let's first take a look at what J.D. Vance actually said, and then we'll take a look at the ad that Harris-Walz campaign cut, and then we'll go from there.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship.
So I think it was absolutely insane that J.D. Vance couldn't just come out and answer that very simple question. And I think a lot of Americans noticed that he wasn't able to concede that Donald Trump actually lost in 2020. And I think it is good politics for Harris and Walz campaign to be jumping on this and showing this to the American people. Because if J.D. Vance were the vice president in 2020, our country could have been thrown into chaos. We don't know what would have happened if Mike Pence didn't certify the election. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ad that the Harris-Walz campaign cut, and then we will look at some reactions to the debate from a few undecided voters.
It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future.
That is a damning non-answer. America, I think you've got a really clear choice of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Now, I think that was a very strong ad, and I do think the choice is very clear between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. And beyond that, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump has already shown us that he is not willing to honor the tenets of our democracy. He tried to overturn a free and fair election in 2020. And J.D. Vance has said that he would have kicked it back to the states, just like Trump wanted, if he were vice president. So the choice is very clear. And I think some undecided voters are noticing these types of things because we saw a really interesting interview on CNN directly after the debate, and one of these undecided voters from Michigan pointed this exact non-answer out. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Who are you going to vote for, and what kind of solidified that opinion?
Well, I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris. You know, one of the stark sort of aspects of that debate that really stuck with me was when they were talking about January 6th and how Mike Pence certified the election, and they were wondering if J.D. Vance would certify the election should Trump lose. And, you know, J.D. Vance didn't really give us a definitive answer, and I'm disappointed in that fact. And I don't think that I can trust someone, you know, with my vote if they're not going to respect it.
I think that is damning for the Trump campaign. Now, I'm not... Obviously, this is anecdotal evidence, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not exactly sure how you can be undecided at this point in the election season, but nevertheless, what this guy is saying is true. And he pointed it out in a way that I think is going to resonate with other Americans. He said that Donald Trump wouldn't respect my vote. And that is the exact correct way to put that. Because Donald Trump tried to round up a whole bunch of fake electors in key battleground states. He got those fake electors to send fake documents to Mike Pence so he could hopefully sign in fake electors and certify those fake electors on January 6th. That is why he is being charged with conspiracy against the United States, taking people's right to vote away because he didn't like the results of the 2020 election. And I think Americans care about this. I think saving our democracy is a very motivating issue for many voters. That's why it was really surprising to me that we had one of Trump's senior campaign advisors, Corey Lewandowski, go on CNN, and he still wasn't able to concede that Trump has lost the 2020 election. So at this point, these people are just shooting themselves in the foot, in my eyes. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, Corey, why is this so difficult for the Trump campaign to answer? I mean, it's 2024. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? Can you answer that?
Jim, I think it's very simple. The American people have passed the 2020 election. They're focused on an election which is just under 5 weeks away. And what we have an opportunity to do now is to talk about two different visions for America. And what J.D. Vance laid out last night is a very different vision than what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris want to say. So, look, we can go back and relitigate the 2020 election, or we can look at what we can do to make America better for everyday Americans who are struggling under Bidenomics.
Yeah,
They're struggling
Corey,
under...
It's not relitigating. It's just a simple question. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? I mean, that's an easy
Jim,
one.
why are we talking about 2020 anymore?
As Tim Walz would say, that was a damning non-answer. And we're not talking about relitigating the 2020 election. It was litigated. Donald Trump took 60 court cases around the country before our courts, and he didn't win a single one of them. I think he won one on a technicality. But as far as finding widespread voter fraud or somehow the election was somehow stolen from Donald Trump was not true. It is still not true today, so there is nothing to relitigate. After hundreds of recounts, we know for a fact that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. This should not even be up for debate. But for MAGA lunatics, the people in the MAGA cult, they are living in a delusion where they still think that somehow Trump lost or that election was stolen from them. So I think this was one of the more powerful moments from the debate. There wasn't a whole lot of clippable moments from the debate, but I definitely think this stood out to me, and I think it stood out to other Americans. And I really like the way Lawrence O'Donnell put it after their debate, or during their debate breakdown. He brought a little humor to the situation. Let's go ahead and see what he said.
He will be remembered for that final exchange about, did Trump lose the election? And he doesn't answer. His technique is to not answer. It makes him, by the way, the very first vice presidential candidate in history who doesn't know who won the last. That's his place.
So, again, that is pretty damning. You are the vice presidential candidate, and you're unwilling to say that you know who won the election that came before you. And I think Lawrence O'Donnell was right to point out that this is going to stick in people's minds because they tackled the January 6th question near the end of the debate. So that is something that is going to stick in people's minds because it was such a powerful exchange and it showed such a lack of character for J.D. Vance. So hopefully people will remember that when they go to vote this November. Because we should be electing folks that are going to uphold our institutions, that are going to respect our democracy, and are going to show the American people that their vote does in fact matter. We live in a democracy, after all. This should be the bare minimum for anybody trying to get close to power in this country. But I want to know what you guys think. If you got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. I'm trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I would very much appreciate your support. If you want to learn, or if you want to see my breakdown of the January 6th conversation during the debate, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.